Europe is gradually closing its doors to Ukrainians, and new rules await Ukrainian refugees. If you or your loved ones are living in Europe under temporary protection, or if you would like to leave Ukraine and use this right in the European Union, you need to watch this episode until the end. Let me be clear, protection for Ukrainians in Europe remains in place. On the contrary, the Council of the European Union has extended the temporary protection mechanism for Ukrainian refugees until March 4th, 2028. So, if you are already living in Europe under this status, you can relax. These changes do not affect you personally at all. Here comes the main point, the reason for this whole episode. A strict exception was added to the extended rules. Newly arrived Ukrainian men of conscription age who are prohibited from leaving Ukraine will no longer be able to receive temporary protection in the European Union. And the most unexpected thing in this story is who came up with all this and lobbied for it. It wasn't some evil Europeans who decided to push Ukrainians out of the EU, you know. No, as was stated directly in Brussels, it was Kyiv itself that requested this. In this episode, we'll break down exactly what the European Union decided. When exactly will all this start working? Who exactly will be affected by all this? Who definitely won't fall under these changes? And who definitely won't be affected? Why? Why? Was Ukraine itself pushing for all this? And what does this mean for thousands of men, and I emphasize women, who are now in Europe or planning to go there? My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's figure out these questions. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're moving towards the 300,000 subscriber mark, so I would appreciate your subscription. So let's start right away with the facts in order to cut through panic and misinformation. The Council of the European Union has decided to extend the temporary protection mechanism for Ukrainian citizens until March 4, 2028. Previously, the directive was valid until March 2027, so it has been extended for another year. At the end of this month, the EU Council is expected to make the final decision, and it will take effect from that moment. The scale of the program is truly enormous. As of March 2026, almost 4.5 million Ukrainians have temporary protection in the European Union. As before, their temporary protection status guarantees them the right to reside, work, access housing and healthcare, receive social assistance, and get education for their children. And now, here is the key new development that has caused all the commotion. Newly arrived Ukrainian men of conscription age are excluded from the program. The wording of the Council of the European Union is absolutely clear, and I quote, Temporary protection in the European Union will be granted only to those who fulfill their military service obligations in Ukraine. That is, Europeans have directly linked the right to asylum with fulfilling one's military duty to their country. And here there are three critically important caveats that need to be stated clearly and recorded. Caveats. First and most importantly, the changes only apply to new applicants. Those who have already received temporary protection in European Union countries will not be affected at all. Their temporary protection status remains fully intact. If you are already under protection in Europe, nothing changes for you. Period. Even if you receive protection in, say, Poland, but want to move to Spain and get temporary protection there again, no problem. In this situation, you are not a new applicant. You are not a new applicant for temporary protection, so the new rules do not apply to you. There is one very important point here. A new applicant for temporary protection is not only someone who has just arrived in the European Union. This is actually anyone who is applying for temporary protection for the first time, regardless of where they physically lived before. That is, if you lived in Europe under some kind of individual status with a residence permit, but for some reason decided to switch to temporary protection status. This means that you are a new applicant, you are a new petitioner, and the new rules apply to you if you lived in the States, in Canada, or somewhere else and are moving to Europe. Since this is your first time requesting this status, the new rules apply. The second caveat, we're talking specifically about those subject to military service who, according to Ukrainian law, are prohibited from leaving the country. That is about men who are abroad, let's say, not quite in accordance with the rules from the point of view of Ukraine's mobilization law. Now for the EU migration services, the primary factor should be whether the applicant for temporary protection did not cross the border illegally during martial law. But if a person left legally, that's half the battle. Because according to the rules, European officials can request an up-to-date military registration document indicating that the holder has no violator status. That very reserve plus, where there will be no violation at all. But here I have to make a remark. The wording of the official document says that it can be this way, but this wording is vague. They may ask or they may not. Therefore, you need to look at the actual practice in individual countries. The third caveat concerns age and gender. According to various wordings, it refers to men of conscription age. A range of approximately 23 to 60 years old is mentioned, but there is also mention of a range from 18 to 60. So, we still need to wait for the final decision of the European Council. For now, what we have is, once again, preliminary. But also, in the decision of the European Council, it is stated that these same restrictions will apply to women who are subject to military duty in Ukraine. Although this point seems more like a formality, since currently women are not restricted from leaving Ukraine at all, accordingly, they will be able to leave legally. Therefore, how this can be checked is unclear. That is, they will definitely have a stamp in their passport showing they left legally. Well, the first signal for the migration services of the European Union is exactly the passport stamp showing they crossed the border legally. Now, about how this will work in practice, because the devil is in the details. According to the new rules, in order to obtain temporary protection status, a male applicant will have to provide documents proving that he has settled all matters related to military duty. How can this be proven? Abroad, with a passport that has an official exit stamp confirming legal border crossing, or with a certificate of exemption from mobilization, either in paper or electronic form. Well, simply put, show that you left legally or that you are officially exempt from mobilization, then temporary protection in the European Union is yours and you'll get it without any problems. If you can't show the documents, sorry, but you won't get any protection. The logic was explained this way by the European Commissioner for Migration, Magnus Brunner. Temporary protection should not be granted to newly arrived individuals who are not allowed to leave Ukraine due to their military obligations under Ukrainian law. And the European Commission formulated the general meaning even more broadly, and I would say more honestly. This decision is intended to balance the need for protection with Ukraine's ability to defend itself as a whole. Well, there it is, the core of this whole story. And now comes the most interesting part. Who actually initiated all of this? This was stated directly by the same European Commissioner Brunner. The proposal to exclude Ukrainian men from temporary EU protection was made at the direct request of the Ukrainian side. Yes, it was Kyiv that approached the EU with a request to deprive draft-eligible Ukrainians of the right to automatic protection in Europe, and the EU Council specifically emphasized this, quote, "The European Union recognizes not only the right of displaced persons to protection, but also Ukraine's right to defense. And in this, a kind of balance has been found." The logic of Kyiv, if you think about it, is quite understandable. For a country that has been fighting a full-scale war for 5 years and is in dire need of people for its army, it is not beneficial when Europe effectively creates a comfortable legal channel for draft-eligible men to leave and wait out the war under the protection of the EU. By removing this option for newcomers, Ukraine is closing off this path. So this is not a European but a Ukrainian mobilization policy, just implemented through the European Union. And I think this is the most important thing to understand about this news. Behind the headline, "Europe tightens rules for Ukrainians," there is actually a decision made by Kyiv itself. Now the main question is when the new rules will come into effect, and here there is some discrepancy. Some claim that it will be from March 2027. They say that even if it's adopted now, everything will only be implemented in March 2027. But it seems to me this will happen much earlier. Let's look at the press release from the Council of the European Union which issued this decision. Here's a quote. "The EU Council will officially adopt the decision to extend temporary protection in the coming weeks. Then the decision will be published in the official journal of the European Union and will come into force the next day. That is, on July 15, 2026, only a preliminary agreement was reached among the ambassadors of EU countries. Now these rules need to be adopted. To do so, the Council of the European Union must formally approve them at an official meeting. This official meeting is scheduled for the end of July, and after the final vote, the text of the document is sent to the official journal of the European Union, and it comes into force one day after publication. Therefore, the new rules will most likely come into effect this summer, not in March 2027. Of course, there's a nuance. There are already rumors that the Council of the European Union might not meet at the end of July. In July, and then the decision will be made after the summer holidays in September. Accordingly, the entry into force of the new rules may also be postponed to September. Now let's sum up. What happened? The European Union has extended temporary protection for Ukrainians until March 2028. And this is good news and the main fact. But there is an exception. Newly arrived men and women subject to military service who are prohibited from leaving Ukraine and who cannot confirm the legality of their departure or exemption from mobilization will no longer be able to receive protection. This was initiated fundamentally by Kyiv itself, for the sake of its own defense capability. Who does this not affect? I'll repeat once again. It does not affect those who are already under temporary protection in Europe. Their status is secure. It also will not affect those who left legally or are officially exempt from mobilization. They will just need to confirm this with documents. Who does it affect? Only new applicants of conscription age who left in violation of the rules. For them, the European door is essentially closing. So these loud headlines about Europe closing its doors are only half the truth. The door to Europe for Ukrainians as a whole is open until March 2028. It's just that for one specific category, those subject to military service who left illegally, the door will now be kept shut. Kyiv itself is one of the hands holding that door shut. But now we're watching how these rules will be written into the national laws of each individual European Union country. There will definitely be nuances and surprises there. Well, take Hungary, for example. The new Prime Minister of Hungary, Peter Magyar, has already hinted that he might ignore this directive and allow absolutely all Ukrainians into his country. So I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.